Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer Sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Welcome, everyone, fans, baby boomer lovers, those who lived in the 50s and had wonderful memories of the 50s, and those who just want to learn more about the 50s. Wouldn't you say, Jackie? That's why we have this 1950s Fun Chat. And before we get going any farther, please look in your lower right-hand corner of your screen. Now, if you're watching this, you should be able to see a red thumb button that asks you to subscribe, and we certainly would love to have you do that because it does help grow our channel, and we love to spread the word of the 1950s. Isn't that something, Jackie, that we're so attached to that decade in which we grew? Mm-hmm. So, Jackie, what's happening today?
Well, before I tell you what's happening, I'd like to make mention of that little scrolling across the bottom, kind of like a ticker tape, www.whilethewindmillwatched.com. You can get much more information about the book, While the Windmill Watched, about Janine and I, about about the way where the book is being sold, and some of our guest speaking engagements that we have been involved in. Also, upper right-hand corner, you'll see the beautiful book on the cover. That cover is an authentic North Dakota sunset, which wraps around the entire book. And our book includes so many memories Janine and I have of living on the northern Great Plains in the 1950s. So we are excited now to introduce our guest. His name is Tom Lidahl, and he was born in February 1946 in Plentywood. That's Plentywood, Montana, a small town which claims the county seat of Sheridan County. It is tucked in the most northeast corner of Montana, sandwiched between the Canadian and North Dakota borders. Now, Tom was baptized, confirmed, raised, graduated from high school, married, and practiced dentistry there for 40 years after schooling and military service in the Army Dental Corps. 5 years ago, Tom and his wife, Mary, decided to pull up roots and follow their grandchildren to Fargo, North Dakota, where they now thoroughly enjoy retirement, hobbies, and family. Now, during the COVID isolation, he finished a bucket list item of documenting many of his childhood memories in the book entitled Cowboys and Clinkers. And the collection has served as a series of bedtime stories for his grandchildren. Well, welcome, Tom. Glad you're
Well, yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you both, Janine and Jackie. First of all, for the invitation to Fun Chat with you this morning. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be fun.
Okay. Yes, well, thank you.
I want to hear more about your Cowboys and Clinkers, but before we do that, I'd like to ask you, if you can, summarize how did a young man from up there tucked in the corner of Montana, how did you your education, your dental career, did you have support, how you came from that little town to your career, where you are now?
Well, that goes back 75 years, I guess, doesn't it? I guess my mentors, of course, are parents and a loving older brother and a grandpa and many coaches and pastors and friends, just like we all had in those early 50s. There were strong character Christians that influenced your life. As far as my own life, like you said, I was born and raised in Plentywood, Montana. And after high school, went off to Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, influenced by my brother again, who had gone there, and some Luther League advisors and pastors. And at the time, I think all I knew was Concordia College. So it was an easy choice. And my choice in dentistry was easy too. I remember when I was in the second grade, I was in the dental chair. And like all children of that time, I was terrified of the dentist.
Yes.
And I remember, in fact, I even remember my mother she didn't drive, but when we would walk uptown, she would take my hand and we'd walk uptown, and I knew where the dental office was. And I also knew that across the street was the city hall. So about a block before the dental office, on every walk uptown, I'd suddenly have to go to the bathroom because I knew that my mother would cross the street, take me over to the city hall for the bathroom break, which I really didn't need, because that way I didn't have to walk past the dental office. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, I was in second grade, sitting in the dental chair, and Dr. Gustafson, bless his heart, he looked at me and he said, "Tommy, you should be a dentist." Now, I don't know if I became a dentist out of fear from that or it just put it in my head, but I never looked back. And to this day, I have never regretted it. And I guess I'm in my 50th year of practicing. I say that because I'm semi-retired, but our oldest daughter, is a dentist, and I still practice with her once in a while. So I'm starting year 51 in dentistry and still love it.
Congratulations.
Yes. And after dental school, and Mary and I and the children went off to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for 2 years, from 1971 to 73. And then small town drew us back to home. And so we took the children and went back to Plentywood, Montana for about 40 plus years. And then, like I told all my friends when they'd ask, where are you going after you retire? I said, we're going south. So we moved south. We moved south to Fargo, North Dakota.
Yes.
Still found.
So here we are.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, I want to go back to when you were a child in that dentist chair, or before you got into the dentist chair. Do you remember what caused that fear? Because I remember having a fear of the dentist also, but I'm curious about yours.
I'm going to blame it on all those older people that said they were afraid and the dentist was a bad experience. I don't really know. The dentistry has changed so much. There was more pain, there was more apprehension, and today's modern dentistry, that's gone. I know still some people fear it, but it's gotten so much better. But that's probably, and I probably neglected my teeth to the point where when I did go, it wasn't any fun.
Yes.
That's me too. Yes, I remember I kind of think the first time I ever went to the dentist, I had 4 cavities, and I was just in shock. And Mom was there, and I remember crying because I was so afraid of what the next step was going to be, and to get a shot of Novocaine to deaden that area so that Dr. Diven in Bismarck could repair those cavities. Oh my gosh, that was just something awful. And I think too, the smell in the dentist's office. There was something about maybe a formaldehyde smell. Would that be accurate?
Isn't that a great smell?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to know you think that.
Biology class. Anyway, that was a positive thing for you. If you look back on it, I feel that you know how little children feel, and so you can help make them a bit more comfortable.
Thank you. I hope I do that.
All right. So let's move on to this book of yours. The portion of the title of Tom's book come from the fact that most boys and girls in the late 40s or early 50s found heroes in the likes of Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and Hopalong Cassidy, and he was thrilled to see them gallop across the television screen. Now, clinkers in the title relates to that stony residue of burned coal. So, Tom, please tell us why the term clinkers earned a place in the title of this little book.
Well, I think since I was a second grader, my life evolved around work and play both. And in order to go to the matinee and watch Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy, Gene Autry gallop across the screen,
Right?
I needed 25 cents to get in, 15 cents to get in, and 10 cents for popcorn. And I, after I'd spent my 25 cents, I didn't have enough for pop, so I'd eat popcorn and go back up to the drinking fountain and get water. So, but I needed money to go to the matinee, and I came from a very I don't like the word poor, but we didn't have money for things like the matinee. So I started my first job in the second grade. I inherited my brother's paper route. So I would save my money from that. Plus I would get a little bit of money cleaning the clinkers out of the coal furnace. And like you said, for us in the 50s, we grew up with coal furnaces, and that residue, like you said, Jackie, was that hard clinkers. So my job a couple of times a week at least would be to clean the ashes and the clinkers out of the coal furnace, and then take them back out and dump them in the ash pile.
Okay, that's right. I've forgotten about our ash pile.
Oh,
Yes, we have one too.
yeah.
And Jackie, whatever happened to that ash pile? Do you recall?
I don't know, but I suppose Dad took his tractor with a great dispersed
Scoop on it and okay. And maybe he used it on ice. I mean, couldn't those be used to help gain traction with a vehicle or an implement on ice too?
Right. And in the some of it blew away.
Yeah.
That's true. Yes, yes. Well, Tom, I'm curious to know about these cowboys. Did you only see them in matinees, or did you have a television at your house so you could watch them on your television screen?
Well, we didn't have a television until I was about 11 years old. And I'll never forget that day, of course. I was walking home from school across a prairie field, actually, and we called a Reba field. That's another part of my book, actually. But I remember walking home, and from afar off, I saw the roof of our house and this strange metal thing coming up from the roof of the house. And I thought, oh my gosh, we've got television. I took off running. I got across that field so fast, and I ran in. And the first thing I saw was, you know what it is, the black and white test pattern.
Yes.
And there was the test pattern on the TV, and I sat down and I was so excited. I could have watched that for an hour.
Yes. Or did you get a lot of snow going across the screen?
A lot. And they ended the day about midnight with the Star Spangled Banner, and then it cut off.
Right.
Yes.
But anyway, as in my very younger years, when I was really the cowboy, we didn't have television, so it was the Saturday matinee.
Okay. Well, I have to tell you that I have a Roy Rogers lover in our family. My husband, Fred, loves Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. And so we found this clock of Roy and Dale.
Oh, look at that.
Right?
I love it.
I know. At a shop in Des Moines. And it hangs on the wall of our office right where he can see it. And we fully expect, because we have such a love of the 50s, that our daughters would really want to inherit this clock. But they don't share the same enthusiasm for Roy and Dale that my husband and I do. But it's fun to have that.
Well, I'm envious. I do.
Okay. Well, it's go ahead, Jackie.
I was going to say, Tom, that I'm glad that you shared your index of your book with us. And I looked over the chapters, and they were all involved. I just got curious and interested in every one of them. But so I know you can't tell us about the whole book, but are there a few favorites grandchildren have, or some that are especially dear to you?
Yes and yes. And I thought about this for a little bit, and if you don't mind, rather than try to summarize, could I just read a chapter or two out of something? And because if I try to tell it, I'm getting to that age where I forget what I wrote down.
Yeah. Oh, please go ahead.
Okay, I was looking at it myself, and my chapters are things like a skunk gets shot, killing chickens and roping raccoons, bullying, sheep and a stinky mink, derailing a railroad car, needles in my butt, cures in the medicine cabinet, and that coffee can in the corner in the bathroom or bedroom.
Yeah.
Ah,
Anyway, I thought, to start, there's just a short little thing. The church has played such an important part of my life. And the other thing was our little residential grocery store. I grew up after age 6 in a small little residential grocery store that my brother and my grandpa designed and built. My brother designed it, drew out the plans, and he and my grandpa built it. Now, the astonishing thing of that is my brother was 13 at the time, and my grandpa was 80. And they mixed the cement by hand. All of the work was done. There was no power tools in those days. It was all a hammer in hand and a saw that went back and forth like this. And so that was pretty amazing. But our home was very modest and small, about 400 square feet that I grew up in. And I measure my garage now, and I consider it a small garage, but it's about the same size as our 4-room house. And the little residential grocery store that my brother and my grandpa built was 500 square feet. So just a small little grocery store. And it was on the east side of town, so it was called the East Side Market.
Mhm.
So with that little intro, bear with me, and I'll just read a little bit about church. The East Side Market first opened in October of 1952. The hours were 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week, but that was just for a very short time. It wasn't long before Mom decided she needed to accompany her boys to Sunday school and church, as she'd done for years. And for the next 20 years, there was a sign on the door of the store, "Open after church," that she'd put on every Sunday.
Yes.
So every Sunday, there was a car or two in front of the store waiting for Mom to unlock the door after the benediction and the short walk home. My great-grandpa, Fred, and ironically, his last name, I'm the dentist, his last name was Moeller.
Oh.
He was a Lutheran pastor for 43 years, one of the first graduates of the Luther Seminary in St. Paul, actually. And I never knew him, but he was my grandma Olga's father, and his Norwegian, Lutheran, and conservative DNA must run strong in my veins, because I love Lefse, Lutefisk, and Jesus. Not in that order, but you get the idea. And then I go on and let's see. My first memory of Sunday school was graduation from kindergarten, and the church, as many of the churches in those days, had that steeple with the bell in it. My dad rang that bell as a small child in the early 1900s. His job was to stand on the steps of the church and watch for the horse-drawn hearse as it left the funeral home on the corner of Main Street 3 blocks away. He'd grab the rope and slowly begin to toll the bell. And I was able to ring that same bell a couple times before church myself as a little boy. And I remember the rope lifting me off the floor between the tolls. It was a big bell for a little kid. Well, once in the church proper, as you probably remember, children and adults were expected to be quiet, take their place in the dark oak pews, and prepare for service. Any loud chatter or visiting was considered quite rude, and that had its place and perhaps gave me a better reverence and respect for church service. But I'm happy with the fellowship and banter that occurs now before church. And if you remember, and I bet you do, the basic liturgical service from the old black hymnal was so rote that one was able to follow along without even thinking about what was being spoken. And I suspect that I mouthed the words often as I tried to decide what name I would give my wooden horse after church when I got out. Would it be,
Yes.
would it be Trigger, Champion, Topper? Who knew?
Yes. Yes.
And as you always probably remember, Holy, Holy, Holy was always the opening hymn. Mom didn't sing very well, and she admitted that, and she certainly didn't know how to read music. Nevertheless, she would open the hymnal, put her index finger on the words of the hymn, and gently move it up and down with the melody as the organist churned it out on the Hammond organ so I could sing along. Those were my first music lessons, subtle as they were, and I'm convinced that that simple gesture of music appreciation started me on a lifelong love of choral music. Christmas, Easter, and Lenten services were always a curious adventure, and I was always a little apprehensive when time came for the offering. At those services, everyone reverently marched to the front of the church, past the altar rail, behind the altar where the offering place sat ominously in the dim light on an unfinished board. It was, in a scary sort of way, an adventure because I never knew for sure what was behind that altar. Maybe bats or mice, like I knew were in the attic at home, or worse, the Holy Ghost.
Yes. Yes.
The Trinity wasn't understood very well by 5-year-olds.
Yes.
Anyway, that's a little bit of a part of my church background. It was very important.
Yeah.
How are we doing for time? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And the church background, Tom, do you give credit to that for really being influential in your life after you left home?
Oh, absolutely. And still is. Just number one.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Those seeds were planted so long ago in Montana.
Yeah, for sure. And they grew well.
Yes.
Great.
Let's see. I talked a little bit about Reba Field killing chickens and roping raccoons. That was kind of a fun one. My kids love that, especially my grandsons love that one.
How did you go about roping raccoons?
Let me give the chicken story. That's even more fun. My dad roped the raccoon and brought it home one night in the car. and he said, "Kids, come out and take a look at what I've got in the car." And I think Dad had been up playing cards and maybe had a couple of beers when he roped the raccoon. But he brought that raccoon home and we looked inside the car. It was dark and shined the light in. There's these big eyes looking out. And the rest of the story is in the book. But okay. The killing chickens is kind of fun. Our neighbors our neighbors on Broadmoor Street raised chickens. What would now be called free-range chickens. That is, they were more out of the coop than in it. And for you city kids, a chicken coop is simply a small house, usually wooden, that has little box nests in it where the hens lay their eggs and perches where they can sleep. The coop usually has a chicken wire fence around it to protect the chickens from predators and to keep the chickens from getting out into the neighbors' yards and gardens. Well, Grandpa liked chickens, fried.
Yeah.
He did not like them in his garden. Grandpa's garden was large in comparison to many town gardens today. He didn't grow anything exotic like peppers, cauliflower, broccoli, or asparagus. His garden had potatoes, corn, carrots, peas, and beans. You know, the normal staple vegetables. Like his tools in the shop, nothing had a motor on it. There was no rototiller. He had a shovel, a hoe, and a rake, and he did a good job of teaching us boys how to use them. Every spring, the ground was tilled one shovel at a time until the straight rows were laid out with a string. Yes. The seed was placed carefully in the freshly raked soil and then watered carefully by hand as needed until harvest. And Grandpa taught me how to water. Hold the hose and move it slowly from one end of the row to the next, and don't stop at the end of the row or it'll puddle up. Back to the neighbors' chickens. They were free range and often got into the garden. Grandpa gave fair warning to the neighbors that he did like chickens fried. And it so happened that a white leghorn rooster made the mistake of crossing the property line into our yard one day. And that happened that Grandpa was working on the roof of the new East Side Market he was building. My brother Larry was on the ground helping to get rafters and other material up to Grandpa. Remember what I said earlier, Grandpa was 80 and Larry only 13.
Mhm.
The rooster should have stayed in the coop that day, as that 80-year-old man had had enough of chickens in his garden. He raised his 16-ounce hammer above his head like an Indian raised his tomahawk in a Saturday matinee movie.
Yes.
In a flash, the hammer flew through the air, twirling as it approached its mark. According to the only eyewitness, Larry, that chicken didn't know what hit him. A throaty squawk, a few kicks in the air, and wings beating up dust from the dirt in our driveway, and it was over. Grandpa had fried chicken that night.
Yes. Whoa, he was a good aim.
It was a good aim.
I'm curious, back on the store that they had, from where did they order their inventory?
You know, the little town we did have a grocery store, or a lumberyard, grocery store. I'm implanted with the East Side Market there. We did have a lumberyard, and I'm sure that's where they got it. But I was only 6 at the time, and I probably got in the way a lot during the building. But I would climb up on the roof and watch Grandpa and hold nails for him, and pretend to help mix concrete and try to lift the wheelbarrow, which I couldn't do. But it was a lot of work. But we did have a lumberyard.
Did the products that they sold in their store, did they come in on the train, on the Sioux line, or
no? We had, as I recall, they would be trucked in. Nash Finch, that name just comes to mind.
Sure.
The Nash Finch company would bring in groceries, and Mom had a little deli meat counter. The meat would come in by truck from Billings, Montana, 300 miles away, from Pierce Packing. That's a name that just comes popping into my mind.
Okay.
And another part of Larry and my job was to mark the groceries with the old black grease pencil. So consequently, I remember so many of the prices because you'd mark them, and Jell-O was 12 cents. Tomato soup was 14 cents a can. Sugar was 66 cents for a 5-pound bag. And I have a chapter about the East Side Market. So a lot of those memories are in my little memoir book too. But
and did the store have hardwood floors that creaked, and did they have grocery carts or baskets, or how did people collect their groceries to take up to the checkout counter?
Well, it was so small that I think the bread counter was in the back of the store, and that was only about 20 feet from the checkout counter. So they could almost grab groceries and put it on the counter and just go like that. It was a very, very small store. And like I said, our house was attached to it. And so it was open from 9 to 9, but basically 24 hours a day, because the back door of the house would often get knock, knock, knock on it. And the men that were going to work early or had forgotten to get something for their lunch. And the cute little story. I remember both Larry and I learned to clerk in the store as youngsters. I was probably clerking in the store when I was in 4th grade. So I did learn how to slice meat, and that's a cute little story. My mother taught me and Larry how to slice meat. The old white scale that you'd slice meat on the slicer and put it up on the scale until you got to whatever they ordered, a pound or a quarter pound, and a little piece of wax paper under the sliced meat. But both Larry and I recall how Mom taught us if the customer wanted a pound of bologna, say, we'd slice meat up on the little wax paper until the scale read 1 pound. Then you'd put one more slice of meat on. And we said, well, why is that? And Mom said, because people can't eat paper. And she didn't want them paying for that slice of paper.
Right. Sure.
So they all got an extra slice of meat.
Yes. What a wonderful entrepreneur. thinking so highly of her customers.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I've shared that
And Rick-
story with Boy Scouts and Sunday school kids and my grandkids. And
Yep. It's okay to just a little bit more because it's good for both people's souls.
that's right.
Mhm. Yes.
Meat for the soul.
There you go. Tom, thinking back in the 1950s, what would be one fun memory that comes to mind that you'd like to share before we close our program today?
Oh my goodness. I was the typical little boy that just did everything that was fun. My brother and I would make rafts in the spring out of the county's material that probably we shouldn't have, but we would make rafts and float it down the ditch to the small little creek that ran behind Plentywood.
Uh-huh.
And then that would join up to a little bit larger river. So we'd raft to the creek and then jump off just before it got into the big river.
Ooh.
So, and my mother caught me doing that one time. And I think it's the only time in my life I got a spanking, but
Yeah.
it was actually kind of dangerous. So that was fun. And building forts. And
Yeah.
I ordered, in Reba Field, I ordered a donkey because they didn't have horses in the Sears Roebuck catalog.
Oh, they had donkeys in the Sears Roebuck catalog?
You could buy a donkey, or you could buy dogs, or you could buy a house, and the old craft houses.
Yes.
My mother, this was in third grade, and I always wanted a horse because my grandpa made me a little wooden horse, but I wanted a real trigger.
Sure.
Well, I knew enough to know how to make out a money order because I had an uncle that worked at the post office. So I went up and got a money order, had it all made out for my donkey. And mother caught me going out the door, and she said, "Tommy, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to go order my donkey." She said, "What?" I said, "Well, I have my money order, and I've saved my money up from my paper route, and I'm going to order a donkey." And bless her heart, she said, "Well, where are you going to feed it?" And I said, "Well, I've got my cowboy lasso, my Roy Rogers rope, and I'm going to stake it out in Reba Field, and it can just pasture out there." And she said, "Well, that's okay, but how about the winter time?"
Uh-huh.
Oops, I never thought of that. So, long story made short, about 2 weeks later, I bought my first bike.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Do
The donkey
you remember? Do you remember how much you had to save in order to buy a donkey?
Well, I remember that my bicycle cost about $8, so maybe the donkey was $8 or $10, and I'm glad to this day I didn't get my donkey.
Right.
Yeah, right. Tom, we have just had so much fun visiting with you
Well,
today
thank you.
on the 1950s Fun Chat. We thank you, Tom Lidahl, for being our guest. And next week, we will have another great guest as we keep moving forward with our YouTube channel, the 1950s Fun Chat. But until then, we hope you, our viewers and our friends, will remember the swell times up in the 1950s of cool cars, soda jerks, and ladies, let's not forget those poodle skirts.
But I
And
want to
cowboys.
Yeah, and cowboys.
viewers, I want to remind you again to click on the red subscribe button and the thumbs up button and tell your friends, even your relatives, about the 1950s Fun Chat. Please do join us live every week, 8 Central Time, Monday evening. And if you can't join us at that time, view our YouTube program found at the 1950s Fun Chat.
You can learn more about Jackie and me at our website, whilethewindmillwatch.com. That website is just beautifully loaded with all kinds of information about Jackie and me, where we might be speaking or zooming into classrooms to talk about our book and growing up in the 1950s. We also want you to be able to have your own personal copy of our book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. And you can order from our website. You can order through our international distributor, the NDSU bookstore. They will ship a copy or multiple copies to you. And if you happen to live close to one of our vendors, which are listed on our website, please patronize them. We just are so lovingly grateful and thankful for those vendors who choose to sell our book, While the Windmill Watched. And again, that website, whilethewindmillwatch.com. We've had fun today, and we hope that you've had fun also. So we'll see you next time on the 1950s Fun Chat. Bye-bye.
We appreciate and thank you all, our viewers.